Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My apologies for my tardiness.
No problem.
Tender merits.
So welcome to everyone. Good to see everyone in person and those who are joining us virtually. Since tonight's meeting, please be aware that throughout the meeting tonight, we are following CDC guidelines for social distancing and mask wearing during the meeting. If you're in need of a mask, they are provided at the location in the front of the room here. Committee members, please do not forget to sign in. For attending guests, please be sure to sign in on the sheet in the front of the room. And committee members, please do not forget to sign in. Public comment will occur before the closing of the meeting this evening. Each comment will have a maximum of 2 minutes. The public comment section portion of the meeting will be limited to no more than 1 hour, and more than 20 comments are received. Time for comment will be reduced to 1 minute. So the first item on the agenda is approval of agenda. Move to approve the agenda items.
Second.
From Kura, the second from Holly.
Who was the first?
Dr. Louis, you say your name, you forgot for the record.
Dr. Yamuri,
Thank you.
I move the motion.
Second, Holly North.
Any discussion? All in favor for approval of minutes?
Aye.
The agenda is approved unanimously, and also approval of the minutes from our December 14th, 2020. There's our motion for the approval of the minutes. As presented.
Motion, Andy.
And Reed, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Ken Burns, second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Right. The motion carries. So tonight we actually, for our agenda, we have Dr. Greg Atkinson, Superintendent of Schools, here this evening discussing Big Five goals and related updates. We want to thank him for being here with us this evening, and we were aware that he has another engagement on the calendar, so we're grateful that he's here and conscious of the time. And after it comes a moment where we need to limit questions and kind of take those for further review, we'll do that, but we want to give you the floor at this time.
All right, well, thank you very much. Again, this is for you, so please feel free to ask your questions as we go along. I just want to give you kind of an update in terms of our Big Five goals and our strategic plan, and then also give you a little bit of information relative to what we're doing during this pandemic for helping some of our more fragile students. So we hope we're doing kind of both of those things. So Big Five goals, these are really something that, when I was doing this job for like 4 years, there were certain things that I just really felt I wanted to accelerate and move forward at a much faster rate than what we have seen before. Some things we were able to really accomplish, but there were other things that I think we needed to really put additional emphasis on. So working with our board, we were able to establish the Big Five, and I'll just go through each of them with you. The biggest one, of course, is always about improving academic outcomes, improving achievement for our students. And I am very, very pleased at what our teachers and principals and our students have been able to accomplish, particularly recently. One of our proudest, I think, is if you look at our graduation rate. We've seen our graduation rate, again, take another pretty substantial increase. It's the biggest jump that we have seen, I think, since about 2005. Now, some people will say, well, that's because, you didn't have the end-of-course exams. And there is a little bit of truth in that, but if you look at the number of students, if you take all of those students out that wouldn't have passed, that wouldn't have got the waiver due to the end-of-course exams, you would still, I think it only takes something like 300 of those students out, so you're still going to see a very large increase. Instead of being like, over 4%, it still would have been up in the over 3%. So that's still an excellent jump, and we're very, very happy with that. Again, that's a credit to a lot of our teachers out there that are working real hard. It's also a credit to Shelley Taylor, and we've got Tammy in the back of the room. You can take some credit for that as well, because they've worked really, really hard to really work with our schools and make sure that our students are on track. And we've seen big results, I think, so I'm really proud of the academic services team for that. If you look at our data in other areas, such as student proficiency, that's extremely important. We've seen some really good progress over the years when it comes to mathematics, probably in particular. We've seen some really big jumps. I'm very happy with what we've also seen with our U.S. history and our social studies. We have made improvements in reading, but I think the ELA improvements, I really think we need to have additional focus there. It's not improving at a rate that I would like to see it. Now, I have to tell you that it's it's one of the most challenging things to move the needle on, particularly if you look at our very diverse student population. Lee County continues to be the fastest growing district in the state of Florida for our English language learner students. So fastest growing, I think this is the 6th year in a row. And so that, if you're a teacher, you know the type of challenge that presents, particularly since our workforce has not caught up to our student population in terms of having staff that really have ability like bilingual. If you have bilingual staff, bilingual teacher, they can shift very quickly in the classroom and help a student over a particular challenge. But right now, it's not like a settled region like Miami-Dade that has a really
Recording in progress.
That's good to know. But Miami-Dade, they have it's more settled there in terms of you haven't seen the growth at the rate that we've seen here, and also the diversity there has been there for a much longer period of time. Our diversity, even since I've been, remember at one point when Dr. Browder, former superintendent, was presenting, our Latina population was something like, something in the neighborhood of about a little over 15%, and quickly rose to 30%. And now, our Hispanic students are really the largest group within our student population, just a relatively short period of time. But as you get older in Lee County, it gets less and less diverse, and that's where your workforce comes in. You have a question?
So thank you, Doctor. Are you saying that we are #1 in Florida for ESOL students?
Not number one in Florida for ESLL students. We're the fastest growing.
Fastest growing,
Yeah,
okay.
fastest growing English language
Thank you.
learners. Yes. Yeah, big difference. There are
Yes.
districts like Miami-Dade that have much larger populations, but they're not growing as fast as we are. We have made some progress, particularly in graduation as it relates to the achievement gap. Really with all of our different minority populations that really have made some real jumps with ELL, and then also with our ESE students, we've seen a very, very large jump. Still that gap persists, so we still need to do some work in that area. So that is a part of our big #1 goal, which is, of course, increasing academic outcomes for our kids. All right? So that's 1. I'll shift now to 2. So 2 is pre-K, kindergarten readiness. I don't know if you're aware of this, you probably are, but we are, when it comes to kindergarten readiness, we're one of the lowest in the state of Florida in terms of our students being ready for kindergarten. There's only one of the Big Ten districts that has a lower kindergarten readiness rate. And then the other ones are, of course, our small, there's like 5 other small, very small districts in the state of Florida. Why is that? We're still trying to get our head wrapped around the reasons, but we feel that even though our business is primarily kindergarten and beyond, that if we have students that are ready for kindergarten, then that's where that gap, you can start to really make some progress on that gap. If kids start school in the level playing field, then you're not going to see those gaps start to widen as much, because while they're in school, their progress is going on at a pretty good clip, equal to each other. It's summertime and coming into school is where you see that gap starts to widen. So looking for opportunities to really improve our kindergarten rate for our kids. A lot of our programs right now have waiting lists to get into them. So what we're trying to do as a school district is really two things. One is expand those opportunities that we see throughout the district. The most recent one we've done is James Stevens International Academy. It was a school where we actually had some excess capacity because the number of students that live and reside around James Stevens aren't as high as what you see in other areas of the county. So we were able to convert two of the buildings at that particular school into a pre-K center that will house over 200 students. So that's another 200 more kids that are going to be kindergarten ready in a district program. So we're really, really excited about that. The board is getting ready to purchase some property near G. Weaver Hips Elementary School, and that's another place that we hope to be able to increase the number of pre-K student seats that we have. We're also working, the second thing is to work with our local providers, our private providers who also do a very good job, but to make sure that we share curriculum, that we are working together to make sure that their kids are prepared at a rate that's equivalent to what we would like to see here within the district. So, and I know Ms. Vaughn, that's one of your passions, this whole pre-K arena. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that? Or maybe I forgot?
No, not without getting on a
Yeah.
soapbox about needing people like county commissioners and others to buy in, because we can't do it alone. But no, nothing.
Yes, sir.
Where is the other elementary school that you were looking at, the G, whatever?
G. Weaver Hips is out in Lehigh. It is this, if you guys remember this, a number of years ago, we converted a couple former Kmart's elementary schools. And so this one is, the G. Weaver Hips is one of those conversions. They're really in the heart of Lehigh.
Okay.
So,
Could you maybe, I like your scenario sometimes about the 3 million World Cup. Could you,
the what?
the World Cup, when kids come ready, and the kids don't come ready, that gap, that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big problem and continues all the way up.
It really is. I mean, and that's the thing that's kind of frustrating for us. You have a kindergarten teacher who's really working hard, but they come into kindergarten at these different levels, and it's hard to accelerate one student faster than the other when they're both in front of you at the same amount of time. So if we can try to work with our community to get more kids ready. I had a retired superintendent reached out to me, I think during my first year in this job, and he said, Greg, I'm retired down here in Lee County. I was a superintendent up north, and he goes, I got to tell you, the game changer for me, and he said, it's going to take a while, but it's important for this community is that if you really start to work on pre-K and catch those kids up, then you're going to start to really see some academic gains. It's the right thing to do for kids, and even though it takes a long time, it's not going to get you the immediate jump. It still gets our kids better prepared. And that's, again, where the gap starts. And so if we can really attack that, I think that will help.
And I know that's very important, Dr. Atkins, but we are uniquely positioned to have a bigger problem in the EML that you talked about, because we still have to attract these students from Guatemala and Costa Rica and Mexico and wherever else. They must come, we must absorb them, and they all come at different levels. So we are dealing with the start, we're also dealing with other areas. I don't know how you're dealing with that, those middle ones too.
Yeah, that's a really, I think, important point. One of the things that we're doing, we're getting better at it. I mean, I think that what he's talking about is as we deal with these students that come in from literally all over the world at different levels, how do you handle that? I think one of the things that you have to do is provide a really good entry program. So if you look at Dunbar High School with the International Academy, that is a they're doing a fantastic job over there. In fact, what we tried to do, we were looking across the state to try to get a better model than what they're doing there at Dunbar High School. And we searched and searched and searched, and the more we searched, the more interest we had in people coming to visit Dunbar High School in terms of what was going on there. So really what we're trying to do is replicate that model.
Right.
The other thing, which gets to another one of the big five things that we're trying to do, is to extend, and this also gets right at the gap, extend learning opportunities for kids before, after school, and also in the summer. So we're trying to do that in order to give some students more time to be able to catch up on the learning, whether it's before school, after school, or in the summer program. So the Support Our Students program, we had to take a little bit of a time off this year, but we hope to get back to that this next year. I think that's one of those, expanding what we can do at the third grade level around summer school, and also others. We actually had this particular year, because we had pivoted and started virtual distance learning, we were able to reach more students than ever before this summer with really, help with their courses and enrichment work. Tammy, I don't know if you have the number of that. I can't remember. The jump was unbelievable in terms of the percentage jump of students that we were able to reach compared to past summers. But so those are the types of things that we try to do. And then I'll get to the workforce part of it in just a second. But any questions on any of that before I? All right, the next thing is my dream is for a student that comes through our school district to be able to graduate from high school not only successfully and well prepared for that next step, but also to have really a good idea in terms of what that next step or pathway is going to be. I mean, how many of you, if you really think about it, when you were at that point in your lifetime, did you really have a clue in terms of what you wanted to do? I mean, my mom and dad were both educators. Dad had been in the military, and so that there's my career options right there. I ended up in both of them: Army, National Guard, and then going to college and going into education. And really, you look back on that period of time, it's like that's what my parents knew. So that's all, and I was fortunate to have that. Many of our students don't even have that at all. And so what I want to see us do is to make sure they're really equipped for that very, very important decision, because there is an amazing amount of opportunity in Lee County. There really, really is. To go out, whether you go to college or you don't go to college. In fact, honestly, I always tell people, it's like, the person who made the most money in my family was my Uncle Jim, who was a plumbing contractor. He didn't go to college, but he was the one driving the Cadillac. He was the one that had the second home. He was the one that always had the leather jacket on, nice, he was the guy that had that. And why? Because he had a skill that was marketable. He had a little entrepreneurship in him. He started his own business, and the rest is history. And so that opportunity can be out there for many, many of our students, but they don't know about it. So a goal of mine is, and our board and our team has joined in this, and that is to make sure our kids understand what career pathways and options are out there. Our high schools have over 80 career paths, over 80. And we start as early as 5th grade we have now the Excel bus. So if you go out to the back of the parking lot here, there's this bus that we converted to the Excel bus. And we've got some local business partners that work with us, and we take this bus to every one of our elementary schools and expose our children to potential career opportunities that are out there. And then in middle school, they take a career assessment. And then what we hope to do is to be able to counsel them in terms of what are your CTE options in high school. wow, there's also at least 10 options there at the middle school level, plus a lot of other opportunities to get certified, not necessarily industry certification, but certified. And then finally, again, back to high school. In our high school, we have these career academies where students can come out of them with an industry certificate, at least one industry certification. And many of them come out with many more of them. So now they have a marketable skill that they can go out into the workforce. They have some idea in terms of what do I want to do when I leave. The other thing I think is important is we've had some incredible partnerships that have helped us along the way, that have given our kids exposure to the career opportunities that are out there. And now, at every single one of our high schools, we have over 170 folks that have joined us as a part of a high school advisory committee. So each high school has its own academy advisory committee that gives input into the high school in terms of their career academies, what they should be offering. It also gives us a kind of a source of people who are, kind of been there, done that. And hopefully we try to connect our academies with also what we've got going on. So if we have automotive, then you want to have somebody that's got that experience there on that career academy. If you have agriculture, somebody has that experience as well. So anyway, expansion of CTE, and then finally, with that, we want to expand our technical college. So expand Fort Myers Technical College. We want to expand Cape Coral Technical College, and we also want to really look at expanding Fort Myers Technical College to have a satellite out in the east, because there's a very large population out there that, I think that really could benefit by having exposure to career academies. We want to, like in Cape Coral, we want to have more of a blue-collar presence out there. This is something Mr. Mangan in the back. What year was that? Do you remember, like 2016 or something? 2016. He took me with Mr. McCormick on a tour out there and kind of talked about what his dream was. Well, now I think we're starting to see where we're going to have a shovel in the ground really, really soon. Expansion of automotive, the automotive technology out there, or auto mechanics, and then marine
welding, electricity, building construction.
Yeah. I mean, think about this, I didn't know this, but they said, we have more boat owners in Lee County than any place in the world. And so working on boats has got, there's a lot of demand for it, so we ought to be making sure that we're training students to be able to do that. We do have that at our Fort Myers Technical College, but to expand it out to Cape Coral, where there's more canals than anywhere, than Venice, Italy, right? So more canals out there, so a lot of access to water, a lot of people on boats. So, he's giving me the look.
You still up on the three, you still have too much go.
Got two more to go.
And my mood was just a question.
It's not a question, actually a comment. As you mentioned, Dunbar High School, they had a career day, I think this last semester. And we were part of it, and I think it was very productive.
Good.
For all the students. It talked about, I think it was mainly focusing on engineering. And I think there was a lot of students that graduated from Dunbar that participated in it, and a lot of professionals that participated in it. And I think it's a very good. And you don't have to be in engineering, can be in similar things in medical or technical, people that are interested. And you'll find that some of us as professionals, we love to have some of these students as internships, or they come and work with us in the summer and so on.
That's great. Thank you for that feedback. And we really do think that those types of opportunities for our kids are really good, particularly when they can talk to somebody who's in the field. That's where I think it's really a valuable experience to them. The other two things, the one I'll touch on very briefly, and that's workforce development. Kind of talked a little bit about kind of that lag there with workforce. And I will just be honest with you guys, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to find high-quality workers, particularly teachers and the skilled trades. That's why some of these things we want to grow our own, which we have both those programs going here within the district, whether it's a trade like auto mechanics or if it's teachers. We have teaching academies in the district, but our colleges and universities, we're seeing a decline in enrollment for colleges of education. That's a huge concern, particularly since we continue to grow as a school district. Florida Gulf Coast University works with us really, really well. Dr. Denui can attest to that. They have really tried. Unfortunately, with the passing of Dr. Hyam, we're kind of in a transition period. But that's something that's a huge concern to me moving forward. So workforce. And then the last,
Before you just leave, I just want to make this clear. We normally meet with Dr. Atkins as an advisory committee from the Africa Network and the Middle East Group. And as bad as it is, the pandemic, we realized, oh my God, this is a good opportunity for Dr. Atkins, because now we can do Zoom. Everybody knows how to do Zoom. And we've got all these organizations in the north and in Canada and everywhere else. So now when we meet the day after tomorrow, we'll be planning which group for you to talk to in Zoom. It's for recruitment of mainly the workforce. Mainly we want more minority, because you can talk to them now anywhere. You can even get all these. So maybe there's something they're trying to get even the 80 group outside there, and we'll work with you as an organization. We are like, my God, this is a good opportunity. Now you can talk to thousands of them outside there.
Yeah,
we are trying to do the same also for the college.
anything that we can do to get access to a different group that we haven't thought about, we need to diversify our workforce because it's really what our students need. I spoke to the language piece. That's you watch a teacher in a classroom, adjust real quick and be able to help a student, as I mentioned before, over a particular challenge because they can speak the language. That's one example, but it's also perspective of where people come from and just setting an example for kids. And then, if you're out there too, understand there's a lot of different pathways now to becoming a teacher. And that's a lot, not everybody is aware of that. And the other piece I think is important is that there are more scholarship opportunities and ways for people to pay for that pathway to becoming a teacher than ever before. I've never seen it like this. So our Human Resources Division can certainly help with that effort. The last of the big five is proximity and proximity-based student assignment. I think this is important, and you guys will have to continue to be, I know you've already probably seen a presentation on this, I believe, correct? So I need you to continue to be highly engaged. The goal here is, we were able to move to a place where we have no DA schools in our district. And I have to tell you, as a parent who raised a child through this school system, that at one time, like where I live right now, which is I live in Buckingham, if you know where that is. So in and around where I live, you want to be able to say, I can safely send my kid to any school within, a certain radius, 5 miles of where I live. And if I were to go back a number of years ago, I couldn't have said that as a parent. Because we had schools that were in that area, very close to where I live, that were failing. Today, there is not a single school very close there to where I live that I would not have, happily sent my daughter to. And that is something that we strive to do so that every child, no matter what address, has an opportunity to go to a great school, relatively close by. So that's, and provide that equitable education opportunity across the entire school district, because all of our schools have to be utilized. So we have to get every one of our schools to where it's an excellent educational institution. So we've gotten to a point where, where I can proudly say we have no DA schools in the school district. Now what we have to do though, is we have to work to maintain that and make sure that all of our schools continue to grow. But in the proximity-based student assignment system, this allows us to get students to those schools more efficiently. So you don't have these long bus rides. And again, give students that chance to go to a school that's nearby. It is about operational efficiency, but more importantly, it's about equitable opportunity across the school district. So this proximity-based student assignment is extremely important moving forward, that we get it right. Because if you don't, if we don't get a lot of input, if we don't make sure that we're ensuring equitable opportunities for all of our kids as we implement this plan, then it'll be a failure. So we have to work together to make sure it's success. Yes, sir.
And this is the reason why we need leadership, to say this one. We need to remember how we got ourselves there. But as we support that proximity the way Dr. Blakely and we told them, we will support it. But we have to be very, very cautious, very careful, or to beware of a possible problem that you come in that is created not by any effort, because no matter how good the schools are, the parental neighborhoods are different. Neighborhoods are different socioeconomic status. There's no question about that. The neighborhood, if you go to the neighborhood of Eastleigh County, the neighborhood of Estella, will always be different. So you must be very careful that we can easily go, but no matter what we do inside the school, there is a potential of danger, and that we must always be aware and monitor it before it becomes ugly and takes us back to the tradition. But you must remember those words of the movement. Separate cannot be equal. That's what we are trying to fight.
Right.
To make it
Toward that end.
yes.
And this is again where I think it's very important for you all to be engaged in this. Important for our board to be engaged in this. And I'm taking a very strong personal interest in this. And then the policy that goes with the proximity plan. In other words, the rules that we play by that are going to be critically important to the success of this plan. So it's not just the boundaries drawn on the map, but it also is the policy, more importantly, really, the policy that goes behind those lines on the map. And what I mean by that is how are we going to make assignment of students to those schools? What are the mechanisms that we're going to employ as a district to ensure that those schools provide that equitable educational opportunity? For example, this is something that could be considered, is looking at student levels and making that a part of the algorithm for ID and achievement level. That's an example of one that potentially could be used. There's others. Dr. Savage is working with transportation to provide a possible way of doing arterial routing so we could even get transportation in a very efficient way to other spots within, and maybe outside that person's proximity zone in some cases. Like if we have, we want to make sure we have equitable access to certain programs. Now remember, this is starting at the elementary level first, so it's not, we're not affecting, whether or not a person can go to IB school in a zone. But we do want to make sure that the kid has an opportunity to go to, an elementary program that is certainly, an equitable experience as any other in the entire district. So the policy behind this is where the work starts now, and that's where your input is going to be critically important.
Yes.
Okay?
Very important.
Because now, fortunately, I think Lee County has become more diverse, so the opportunity to do this is better than it's ever been in the past. Because back when back in the day, we were very much more divided in terms, or segregated in terms of how we lived as a community. Like if you look at Lee County, I moved down here in 1988. And if you look at the composition of different neighborhoods, they weren't nearly as diverse as they are today. If you look at where I live right now, extremely diverse around where I live. And where I used to live, there for a while I lived in Fort Myers, and I was in Cape Coral, and now I'm back in Fort Myers. Cape Coral used to not be as diverse as it is today, now it's becoming much, much more diverse. So, but still, having said that, I think that one of the lessons we learned moving from the 3-zone system to the sub-zone system and taking out certain policy decisions, we watched some of our schools start to resegregate. And I'll give you a quick example, and I gotta make sure.
Kicking you out?
Yeah.
No, we're keeping him on his time.
All right.
But I was a principal of Paul and Summer Middle School, okay? And back in the late 90s and early 2000s. So back then, if you went to Franklin Park, if you went to Fort Myers Middle Academy, if you went to Tice or wherever, your population, your diversity, it was those schools are very diverse. You moved to that new system where they didn't put in some of those important policy decisions. What you started to do was see some of those schools really start to resegregate to a point where Franklin Park almost, it was something like 99% minority, particularly heavier African American than any other group. Whereas when I was just down the road from, because I was at the old Dunbar, what is now today Dunbar High School, the new Dunbar, and it was Dunbar Middle when I started there. And at that time, like I said, just right down the road of Franklin Park, it was about a 45, 55 split in terms of it. And then you had in terms of, you start looking at socioeconomic levels, that was pretty diverse. Same with Palmer's Dunbar Middle School. But then it shifted. And now you see things start to shift back because of some policy decisions that we made. But we got to be very careful not to let that slide back to where it was, because I really watched some schools resegregate during the mid-2000s. So that's, it's good. The fortunate thing about that experience, I've been a principal when there was no zones. Then I was principal when we transitioned to the zones. And so we got to watch that from a very first row. And then in the district office, as a member of cabinet, got to watch what happened as we transitioned to the current system that we're in today. So hopefully that experience gives me a little perspective that will help, at least I'll be able to provide a little input in terms of what are some things we should avoid. But it's not, I don't have all the answers, and that's where I think y'all's feedback and other community groups is going to be very, very important. Okay?
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. You said be conscious of your time, that you're trying to split spaces, so we appreciate that. And if there's additional questions that may arise, we'll make sure to record those and try to present those to you in the future. So.
Before you, I just want to say congratulations. I think that the school district, in adjustment to the COVID, all the teachers, you talked about the academic improvement. I think those teachers need a lot of support, commendation. That they've done just very, very well.
The teachers have done amazing. The hybrid system and all the schedule changing and the contact tracing, and I just am in awe of what our teachers have done. And truly grateful. We have an amazing workforce that's been done without them. It's been very successful. Real quick, I gotta say this. I wanted to tell you guys this. Fragile Learners, ELL, speaking of staff, our teachers and principals have really worked really hard to get those students back to face-to-face. So we've got almost 87%. We were at something like 64%, and now we're up to 87%. And then you got places like Carl Burnside at Dunbar High where I think you got like all but one student or some crazy number like that. Because of all that, getting on the phone, calling, and getting them in there, begging them to come back. So, anyway, thank you. Yes, we got the agency roundtable. I'm trying to make a Zoom call for that. So, yeah, it's about the Imagine Solutions. It's a pretty good opportunity for our kiddos to teach back to teachers and staff and community members. So,
Thank you for your sacrifice of your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so we'll continue on through the agenda. We'll have Mr. Brian Hernandez, Director of Constituent Services, and Tammy Scott, Coordinator for MTSS, here to even discuss the student code of conduct and solicit feedback and recommendations from the committee.
Thank you very much, Dr. Blakely. Good evening, Brian Mangan and Tammy Scott is joining me in the back. I know this is Dr. Jessica Duncan, our Executive Director of Student Services, is normally with you all. She wasn't able to make it tonight, so Tammy's going to be taking notes for me. To have this presentation, kind of keep myself on track. It's about our code of conduct. And also there was a request for some demographic information about students who have been assigned to Success Academy. And I do have that. So it's kind of a two-part presentation this morning, this afternoon. But the majority of it is going to be about our code of conduct. I wanted to go over the structure of it because it took a radical shift last year with board approval in May-June timeframe. And really was something that hasn't happened with our code of conduct probably in about 6 or 7 years from the last major change of it. And so what I have is the first 5 bullets up there are kind of the outline of our code of conduct as it exists right now. And you do have copies of it in your handout. And there's one other handout in there, a poster that is folded in half that is from the state of Florida for our school environmental safety incident reporting, or what we commonly call as referred to as CHAPTER. And I'll touch on that in a little bit as we go through this presentation. To begin with, you'll find this right in our code of conduct. I'm not going to read it to you, but it just as a point of reference, just inside the first couple of pages. When you think about schools, if you ask any administrator what's their first responsibility on a daily basis, it's going to be safety. In our code of conduct, it goes a certain distance in assuring safety and helping us come up with a common frame of reference, and also our approach to safety inside of our building. And so if you look at this, you will also see that not only is it about the safe learning environment, but also about embracing diversity, stability, and academic achievement as an entirety inside of our district on a regular basis. When we talk about this as a leadership group inside the district, whether it's our building level administrators or folks down here, we're currently engaged in a book study called High Reliability Schools. And they have 8 major indicators for the school. And the first 2 leading indicators for it are, does your staff and teachers feel safe inside your school and they feel it's a safe environment? And then the second leading indicator is, does your students and parents feel that they have a safe school? So it ties right in not only to what we do on a daily basis, but we also do as a professional development course, as an administration and teaching composite. The other things that make up inside our introduction are the things that that we moved to the front. This was one of the big shifts. We had this stuff scattered throughout the old code of conduct, so we put it all up front. The important things right up front when we're trying to communicate what we're all about to the district. With all these things up here, though, what else should we be missing? And I know in the interest of time, we might not spend a lot of time on questions today, but these are the type of things that we were hoping maybe some feedback, some thoughts about, whether we're talking about our updated non-discrimination policy that came updated this fall, the equity issues that students and employees have a right to, follow the process that's outlined in there, our board policy that, governs how we respond to discrimination grievances, and of course Title IX, which took a huge center stage last year and continues to do so as we have expanded our approach and revised our approach to Title IX investigation inside the school district. The next major portion of the code of conduct is our rights and responsibilities, and it covers the 3 major groups. The staff, from the principal of the schools to the teachers and everybody in between. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
Too fast?
I can't let you go on without describing what Title IX is.
Okay. Title IX is a federal law.
That's, you understand it probably now, but we as an advisory committee may not.
Thank you, appreciate your thought point there. Title IX is a 1972 federal law that governs how discrimination, harassment, things that are based on anything from ethnicity to race to sex to gender, any of the protected classes, religion, and how when you have instances of those, and how the school and the educational organization respond to those and correct those inequalities. And before I go any further, I got a couple experts over here. Anything to add on that? Okay. Because real experts are right over there. I'm familiar with experts over there. So, thank you very much for that. Also, we have our parental rights. You'll see that covered in there. Most notably, the parents have a right to inspect their students' records, their academic records. They also have a right to request exemptions from certain things that they might not agree with in their curriculum, whether it's based on a religious belief, personal belief, or something that along those lines. Typically, things people would think about would be sex education inside of health classes and things like that. And then with our students, we have rights for our students, which is their right to learn, the right to understand the code of conduct, and the right to respect and to be respected. And we also codify that in our 5 R's right there as well. So as we contemplate this section of it, are these rights and responsibilities clear, and are they reasonable? And should we expect, or should we emphasize them more? Those are the types of things that you reflect on this. Like to have that input as well. And I'll just jump on something Dr. Blake just said, if you don't mind. If there's something that occurs to you afterwards, please don't hesitate to email and funnel it through Mr. Eady's office, Mrs. Torres Nunez, and they'll get it to me, and we'll make sure we capture it as part of our feedback that we're gathering on this. The next portion of our code of conduct is interventions and corrective actions. It sounds a little ominous, but this is actually where we try and recognize the good and celebrate what the positives that the students are doing, whether it's our PBIS, keying in on social emotional learning, which has taken center stage in so many areas as we think about the number of students that have been suffering from the pandemic, and how we have implemented things like mental health. Wednesdays, I believe, is our time in our district where our schools work with all students across all levels on shoring up their emotional well-being. And also our multi-tiered systems of support, which I have an expert also in the back room. Mrs. Scott is our lead for the entire district in regards to the multi-tiered system of support. And what that is how are we responding to our students when they are exhibiting whether it's academic or disciplinary needs. The tier 1 is the vast majority of our students. About 80% of our students fall into tier 1. So it's kind of universal things that we do for our students. Now there's just good practices, whether it's instructional or behavior. Tier 2 is those students that are struggling, again, whether it's academically or behaviorally. And that makes up to anywhere from 10 to 15% of our student population. And inside of there, you'll see a list, and it's not a finite list, it's just a reference point list for our educators, our parents, our students, so that they can have that common conversation about how to implement these responses to concerns and issues. And then tier 3 is our highest level, and where our most concern is, and our smallest population. That's reflected in that pyramid, not really up there to read, but more to reference, because there's a big one in the code of conduct for you to look at. The question here would be, how else can we celebrate our students' success? When you look in there, you see the PBIS, and you see the universal supports, and you see some of the things that we recommend for schools to do. What else are we missing in regards to recognizing students for doing the right thing, and behaving in the right manner, and performing in the right manner academically, and how do we, step up our game and say, nice job, a lot more than a nice job. Yes, sir.
On that pyramid, the tier 1, 2, and 3, can that also be considered like tracking the students throughout their success?
Actually, Tammy, why don't you talk about that real quick? That's her wheelhouse right there.
Absolutely. So students that are receiving more intensive supports, they work through a problem-solving team, and that's a multidisciplinary team within the school, and that team comes up with an action plan for each individual student, and they collect data on that. So if they're in an intensive intervention, they should be receiving additional supports from outside of the classroom, experts from outside of the classroom. That cannot necessarily be done only by the teacher. So there are additional supports, and then we do collect the data because we need to make sure that what we're doing is working, and if it's not working, then how are we gonna come back and figure out what to try next?
Okay, so this isn't like classroom type ABC grading them and keeping them in pods and grouping them and tracking them?
This is more trying to get to that individual student, especially tier, and mostly tier 3, definitely, yes. Our next part is our school disciplinary part. A lot of this portion, the first front end of this section of the code is loaded with a lot of information that, comes from state statute, like the zero tolerance. Some of it's from our board policy, which is also springboarded from state statutes, such as threats of violence and responses to those, and how we are conducting certain procedures on campus. We have our off-campus felony act, but listed the ones that are considered the big ones in the district. Typically, when you have a secondary student coming in 6th grade, 6 through 12, if they're off campus in the evening, weekend, whatever, and they commit a felony offense and they get arrested and then subsequently charged, then the school has to take a real serious look when it involves weapons, drugs, sexual offenses, or battery, and whether it's appropriate for the student to remain on the campus, or maybe they need to be going over to Success Academy until the matter is addressed and adjudicated by law. Yes, ma'am.
Is that policy determined, written down, or is that determined by a person?
It is in our code of conduct, but as far as making that determination, it's really up to the building level principal. If they have something where it's a weapons offense, and maybe the weapon was, I'm trying to minimize it, but perhaps maybe it was a knife. And they're looking at that and they're saying, okay, the knife has been taken off the student by the police and all this other stuff, and they don't feel that is a threat, so maybe they won't make that decision. But if it's something like a firearm, then you're talking, going back to the zero tolerance, and they have to really take a hard look about, does that student really need to stay on the campus? Will they pose a threat to the campus? And so then the principal would have to make a decision in a school-based hearing with the parents present.
Can I ask you a question on that? On the off-campus, are teachers notified? And how is that done exactly?
We have something called the felony something notification system, felony advisory notification system called FAN. And it comes through student services. One of our executive secretaries gets it on a regular basis. And as she gets it, she gets 2 types of notifications: arrest and then charges, if they are made charges by the attorney office. But she then sends it to the principals of each of the schools where that student is, with instructions about notifying the teachers of that student, and also reminding them of the confidentiality portion of having that information shared. That information is supposed to be not kept in the student folder, it's supposed to be kept separate, and after 9 months, it's removed from every part of the record. Now, if it's one of these major offenses like that, and they hold it.
Yeah, that's what I'm mostly concerned
Yeah,
about.
it is supposed to go out. It is on our list for this month at our principals meeting, through Mrs. Duncan and myself, to remind our principals, when you get these notifications, you are supposed to turn around and notify your teachers and make sure they understand. If it's an arrest, we're not doing anything on an arrest because you're not allowed to do anything on an arrest. If it's a charge by the state attorney's office, then you contemplate taking action or not.
Okay, is that fairly new?
It's been going on for a long time. I remember getting them as a principal going way back to 2006 when it started, so I think I remember getting them as a teacher.
Yeah, when I was a teacher at Estero, and I know I had gang members in some of my classes, I never got anything like that, so I don't know if.
I mean, it should have been going on, and I know it's something.
And I think, honestly, this is my personal opinion, that it's only fair to give the teacher a bit of warning about a child that might be, I mean, I had one in one of my classes that was expelled from the school finally, and a few months later, I read in the newspaper he was an accessory to murder. And I think it's only fair, but the principals are making that decision then, right?
Well, they don't have the decision about notifying, they have to notify, they're supposed to
They
notify.
have to notify their teachers?
They have to.
What you said to
For charges, not arrest.
For charges, not arrest.
No, for arrest and charges, they get both of those. So if the student gets arrested, and then a couple months later, the state attorney's office gets around to charging you for whatever reason, and then, so you get a second notification, like, well, this looks the same, but read it, it'll say charge instead of arrest. And you're supposed to send that out for full. That's the expectation. If it's not happening, like I said, it's gonna be a reminder point at this principal's meeting.
I don't know that it is. I'll ask some of my teacher friends in high school.
I know right now that's not a part of our notes, and then it's something
Okay.
that we will address.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be challenging, I'm just
No,
saying,
it's a concern here also.
is it happening? And I think, as I said, it's only fair to warn a teacher,
They need to be prepared. Somebody comes into the class and says, did you hear about so-and-so? They need to be able to, is this appropriate for this environment?
they just need to
Yeah.
have that background.
They need to have awareness. Yes, sir.
So I guess the presumption of innocent until proven guilty is out the window?
Well, in regards to the, like I said.
Charges are charges.
Well, charges are charges. That's-
They're not adjudicated.
And then this
And
is,
sometimes they're forced into plea agreements.
sometimes they are, but that's not something that we get involved with. That's part of the legal.
I understand, but we're notifying all these people that they're guilty or be on the
We're
lookout.
not notifying them they're guilty. Just notifying them that they've been arrested or. if they've been
You're
charged.
telling them to be on the lookout.
I think it goes back to what Mrs. Vaughn was saying. I think.
It's giving more scrutiny to folks.
I think it gives the teachers the right to know what they have in their classroom and how they need to
All right.
be prepared for it.
So should we publish their pictures in the school newspaper?
The minors.
I don't think anybody would be doing that, but, no, sir.
And then presenting this is, it seems to me that if I'm a person that is marginalized and treated differently, that this is treating me differently, even if I might have been in the car with someone with drugs. Wasn't my drugs,
Well, and that's why
but they found it in the car, but I was charged.
well, that's why they would sit down and have that in school-based administrative hearing. They sit down and the principal says, hey, tell me what happened, what's going on here. Student says, hey, look, I was in the car, shouldn't have been in the car, but it wasn't myself. They charged everybody in the car. Principal has to take that in consideration as they reach a decision about should the student remain on campus. If it's something that's going to cause in their opinion, it's going to cause a problem on the campus, they have to make that decision of weighing between the individual and the campus as a whole. It's a tough decision, and there's no guarantee that this is always going to happen in this way. That's why they hold that hearing. Now, if they say, no, I think this kid is, in a bad spot at the wrong time, and they decide that the student's going to stay on the campus, and stays on the campus. If they say, no, this is such a high profile thing, it's causing a problem here, and I'm not comfortable with the student being here because of what they were involved in, they have the right to make that recommendation, that's what that means. Or until these situations are adjudicated. And that's really up to the court system, that's how it is.
I'd like to also just share some concerns about this. I don't think that it's equitable to notify teachers, as you said, mass notify teachers of something that somebody has not been convicted of. When you add to the fact of what Mr. Williams was saying, so you have like a marginalized person, Ms. Vaughn was saying she had gang members in her school. Those gang members have every right to an education as anyone else, but they're going to be viewed as a gang member if they're gonna get an email that says they were charged with something. And this also gives me a lot of concern about, if these children are immediately going to this principal to be interrogated for something as a criminal, and this principal gets to decide whether or not they get to even stay in school, this whole process strikes me as wrong, and it does not strike me as proper equity and diversity, and I think that everybody needs to look at that. That's terrible.
Okay, that's why I'm here gathering information.
May I clarify something? I think you really maybe don't understand. I'm looking at it from a point of view as a high school teacher with 16, 17, 18-year-olds in my class. And it's not like it's mass sent out. I mean, as teachers, we learn about medical issues with kids. I mean, we keep everything, at least it should be, it's all confidential information. And, you know, we absolutely need to know medical issues because we need to be aware if a child has an EpiPen or if for, and it really is, I think teachers should be aware. They're not doing anything, and I can tell you right now, looking back on my kids, that I didn't view them any differently. I never talked about anything like that, and a good teacher, and we have excellent teachers in the district, in my view, they're not going to be doing that. But, you know, if you have somebody coming into your home, let's say, and the person is a known person that has been known to carry a knife or been known to have other weapons, and the classroom, yes, I know it's not our home, but it's the responsibility of the teacher. So, you know, for instance, not that I would get in anybody's face, I wasn't that kind of teacher, but it's been known that kids decide, gonna get that person, or you just need to kind of tweak how you deal with these people. This is my personal view. I'm not speaking as a board member, I'm giving you my personal view from my personal experience. And I had kids with all kinds of probation that I didn't even learn about. Sometimes I learned about it from the child himself.
So I wonder if it's not,
I'm sorry,
Just to piggyback off what you were saying, you know, it's good for the kids to have an education, but it's also great for the teachers to be safe in the classroom. Because me being in the classroom, I'd rather be safe giving the kids an education, knowing that even though, yes, you know, you're innocent until proven guilty, but it's also, I'd rather be teaching than being worried that this child is going to snap and have a gun or a knife. Then, I mean, because, you know, I've been pushed, I've been, you know, involved in, you know, a child, you know, fighting me. And there's nothing I can do about it, you know? So I'd rather know confidentially that they have these charges, because I've seen kids that I had as a student, and their face has been on the news because they've had, you know, prior problems. So I don't know if you're a teacher, if you've been in the educational system, but I'd rather know than not know, because you don't know what that child has in their personal possession, and you don't know what kind of mental capacity that child can be in, their home life. Like this one child came to school, and my daughter's school was gun. So, you know, that's just me personally. I'd rather know ahead of time as a teacher that this child has this problem. And I'd rather the Success Academy deal with it than me as a teacher up in there teaching. And I'm scared thinking this child is going to pull out something and have a fight. But that's just me personally. Yes, they deserve an education, but that's why they have Success Academy. You know, so.
No, I just want to touch one point that's brought up. It's not,
Success Academy though, like that, like I get that, but the point is there are children who are being shoved to Success Academy, children who have not done those terrible things, and I'm sorry that you had that happen to you, it's frightening, I understand that. Preventing this fear, you know, not everybody is as open-minded and educated as you, Ms. Vaughn. There are going to be people who are going to read something and they're going to take their prejudice and they're going to apply it to a situation. Obviously, if somebody's mentally unstable and has a gun and has robbed somebody, the principal's going to say, okay, this child is not in a position to be safe to come to the school. But there are these lesser things where if they are presumed guilty and people have a predetermined prejudice, and we want to have these policies in place so that it's not dependent on somebody being enlightened and it's not dependent on like these things. We have to have these policies in place so that the children who should not be just like send and dismiss these children, if these children are told that they're guilty, even they're not guilty, and then they're sent to Success Academy for someone else to deal with, there's a trap, this prison the pipeline that we talked about. We're looking to stop this from happening and save these children's lives. And if we put this policies into place that pushes these prejudice tracks, these children are going to be just swept into this. And this is why we're looking at this, that yes, we have to be safe, but we need to think about these other children too. We need to think about all the children, that everybody is guaranteed this education.
And I will say that, when the notification goes out, it doesn't go to all teachers, it goes to the teachers that have that student. So if you're at a high school, student has 8 teachers, it'll go to those 8 teachers, not to everybody. The other part of it that I would offer is Success Academy is much different from what ALC used to be and what it was in the past. And I know Mr. Bowen would welcome anybody from the committee to come out at any time to visit and tour the school and see what they're doing there, because they have taken massive leaps forward in regards to dealing with the whole child. And not just you're gonna sit here until this is done. That's not effective anymore. What we're shooting for when a student goes over there to Success Academy is that we're addressing their academics, their behaviors, their attendance, and they have staffing specialists, they have behavior specialists, they have licensed mental health providers there to work with these students, because you're right. If we just said, you're a bad kid and that's why you gotta go here, you're 100% right, it's gonna be a prison pipeline. But if we're working with them there, and we're trying to turn them around and give them the skills and reteach the skills that they might have forgotten, or to teach them in the first place, so that when we send them back into their traditional school, after this situation is adjudicated, that's when the student returns, after they had this situation. So once the judge adjudicates it, the student is released from Success Academy and heads back to their regular school. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. She had her hand up. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's right.
I think by then the damage may have been done, but just wanted to touch base on what she said, because I actually had both situations. I think there's a different, the medical versus the criminal is 2 different things. I actually have a child that has an EpiPen, and yes, I'm grateful that all of the teachers know. Anybody with peanut butter, stay away from her, because that kid saved her life, you know? But I also had a child that was accused of something that, I mean, it took us a lot to, my words, her words, it wasn't until Goldberg came in and $5,000 later that she was able to get off and be, she wasn't gonna end up at ALC. So sometimes things happen to innocent, and that 2 months, 3 months until the judge can come up with that decision, or 2 weeks or whatever it may be, can change and can change a child.
Absolutely.
So I think it's, I understand both of their point of views, because my sister's a teacher, but I'm leaning more towards, there has to be a better way, because the principals tend to go straight with the worst case scenario, unfortunately. Guilty until proven innocent.
Tough, because that's one of those things where I find myself in case by case mode as opposed to a general thing, and so that's why we're here tonight, so that we get this type of feedback that's being captured, so that we can bring it back, and before we bring it to the board for approval, we can have the input of our stakeholders. Absolutely.
Right. I think the main point here is for you to hear that this has potential of very dangerous thing happening, because sometimes behavior and ratio or socioeconomic status doesn't be related. One question was that you could have a misunderstanding of the case, and then you already misjudged the case. The kid was actually innocent, but you already, by reporting all over, guilty. And I know we can go on either way. I respect, I've been the teacher, and I know some kids can bring weapons in the class. I need to know what happened, But at the same time, we need to be very careful and very cautious. The other thing that's very important is how you make the students aware and the parents about their rights. The rights needs to be communicated. But I know we can go both ways. You can see the merit of both sides, and you can see the either way what it means.
Yes, I think the one theme in here, that whether you're leaning towards the teacher side of it, you're leaning towards the student side of it, the essential thing in here is relationships. I know that might sound trite to say up here, but I am deadly serious about it. If we're not building relationships from the get-go, from the time a student first walks into the school, whether they're a kindergartner or they're a transfer from Texas in the middle of 10th grade, if we're not starting to build relationships with those students, then it's going to become more of a problematic situation if something does untoward happen with that child. We have a better relationship, and we do that across the board with all of staff members. And look, not all teachers are equal, not all principals are equal, but with that as a fundamental understanding. And when I talk about some of these stuff in the levels and the responses, kind of get to that a little bit about why it's important to have relationships when you're responding to a misbehavior of a student. Yes, sir.
I just have one thing to add to that, and I think that when we do this to students, sometimes we can have a predetermined destiny or a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. And if I know somebody has been accused of a felony, then I am going to treat them differently. I will treat them differently because I know they are different. It is just how humans behave. They will react on that prejudice or on that knowledge. If I know as a police officer that someone has a gun in a car, am I going to treat that person differently? You bet your sweet bitty I am. I will probably have them remove themselves from the vehicle, put their hands up, maybe handcuff them while I go through the traffic stop. You treat people differently based on the situation and the knowledge that you have. Why do you think 3/4 of the cops will never ask you if you have a weapon in the vehicle? They don't want to click a no because they don't want to treat you differently and be accused of prejudice. So I think that just that knowledge makes that student be treated differently, period, end of story.
Just a point of reference to, you mentioned the system. Is that something that is a local or state system that requires that notification?
It's in cooperation with local law enforcement, and so there's, if it's something happens on a daily basis, then there's daily notifications sent in, and then it's distributed through our student services department, schools.
Now, was that determined as like a board policy that from that notification that you received from local law enforcement? Is that like a policy? I'm trying to just get the words of the policy.
Honestly, on that point, I don't think so. I don't know. I'd have to go back and research that for you. You know, whether it came from board policy or something that comes from state statute, I don't have that answer to you.
And one last thing, I know we got to push on. We mentioned the mediation, the conversation with the principal. Are there opportunities for that student to appeal that process, or is that determination final?
Yes. Anytime that a student is referred to the Academy, they have the right to appeal, and that when they're recommended for Success Academy, their information is sent down to student services for its review. If there's an IP or 504, we have the appropriate staff from the ESD department or equity take a look at it and make sure that the MDR process is also followed correctly. And then there's the parent of the student is notified by letter, and inside that letter is a how to appeal the process as well. Going to just continue on and appreciate the discussion. We kind of touched on these next couple of things right there. On the right-hand side, as you're looking at it, the MDR, the manifestation determination review, again, that's tied to a student with a non-ET or a 504, or even this year we extended to a student with a perceived disability. So that if the school holds a school-based hearing and the determination is made for whatever type of consequence, typically it's usually associated with Success Academy, the MDR committee meets independent of the administrative people, the administrative staff that was in the school-based hearing, and the parent and the student are the only ones that are back and forth between both. And then they ask some questions and they follow the process to determine was the student's disability, the cause of the misbehavior. And if it was, then the student will not be going to Success Academy, and they would have to find a different way forward. And then there's also a limit on the number of days a student with an IEP or a 504 can be at Success Academy, and that's 45 days. Currently, we have 3 levels of misconduct. This is, again, not for reading up here, but it's in the code of conduct. It's a quick reference to show all 46 codified offenses inside the code of conduct and where they would fall out. What we're looking at this year, a big change for us moving forward, would be breaking this down to 5 levels. We've looked at the big 10 districts, the 9 others other than ourselves, and the ones here locally in Southwest Florida, and to study who else has moved from a 3-level system to a 10-level system. And we have, so there was a total of 13 counties looked at, and 8 of them have either a 4 or 5-level system, and it's tied to Cessor. And that's that poster size form that was put in there. Now, Cessor has those little asterisks, and if it's a level 1, they're most serious, it has a 1 star. And as you can see from the behaviors, they're pretty serious things that a student can commit. The only one on this list that, we're starting, this is our draft, this is not in stone or anything like that, that's our gathering, is the weapons possession. As we looked at different districts, there's a little bit of disagreement. Some people thought that this was just as serious as anything else up there, and other people thought it was a step down. I can easily hear arguments both sides. Well, are you talking about a firearm? Or are you talking about a can of mace? And back and forth with that. So it could be something where it may be here, or maybe it goes down one with an arrow pointing up to the highest level. A couple of things that was interesting. Glades County considers all of these things to be 0 tolerance. Brevard County, they order mental health services for any one of these offenses, whereas we would do it for weapons and threats. So something for us to consider as we're studying other districts on. It's interesting, we would call this a level 5, and right now our level 3 is our highest level of offenses. And Hillsborough is the only one that we found that matches what the state does with the 1 star and the level 1. So it's something to consider. Is that a big format? Should we change that? Or is that, stay with what we're doing because that's what we've been doing and that's what people are familiar with, back and forth on something like that. More format than anything else. The next level of behaviors, and again, you can see the 2 stars, what the state considers the next level. That's where the off-campus felony would fall in for us, and it's a local code on that as well. Again, Glades County is considering these to be all 0 tolerance as well. Duval County implements a progression steps, and this is something I referenced before. If you look inside our code of conduct, we give our schools a list of corrective strategies for an infraction, where this would be a little bit more limiting right here. Duval County says, first time you do this, this is what happens. Second time, this is what happens. Third time, this is what happens. We moved away from that about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 6 or 7 now, and went to more of a restorative practices, working with our students, and what can we do to try and keep them in our schools as opposed to having them leave out of school, suspension, or success academy, that sort of thing. Just a side note, the state is updating, used to be breaking and entering, now they're calling it burglary. The 3-letter code is still the same. This is where we're starting to see some differences though. For these offenses, now we're kind of in the middle of the spectrum, and there's a range, but also we use the Cessor as our guide for this, and we start to see some of our local codes popping up here. Why we put safety, false, forgery, and gang-related here is when we looked at the other districts and looked at our own experiences, this is where it's going to follow the most common. Hendry County had something that we've kind of seen before. They held an abeyance, so if a kid got in trouble, they had a meeting, kind of hold those days over here, let the kid continue, kind of one of those things where you would, hey, if you mess up, we're going to implement this consequence. Otherwise, you kind of got to walk the straight and narrow. And then after X number of days, we get rid of it. So it was an interesting concept from there. Brevard, Glades, and Miami-Dade, they consider disruption on campus, stealing, and sexual offenses higher than what Cessor considers them. Again, their own, organizational approach to it, but something for us to consider and discuss as well.
What does adjustment of program mean?
Change the schedule, something to that effect. Maybe they need to do something where they can't be in the same classroom with a certain student because they just can't get along, or,
But that's under sexual offenses. Why
Oh,
does-
no, I'm sorry, this is not a direct one-to-one, this is just
Oh,
kind of a
okay.
laundry. My bad.
I
Oh,
was like, this is not matching up
Yeah,
for me.
no, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
My apologies on that.
Their big list is on 52.
Yeah, and this is just, to keep it moving on. Now, at level 2, you'll notice that there are some things in here that are still on assessor, and they're the lowest level of assessors, but yet some districts will consider alcohol just as dangerous as drugs and have it way up on the list. Although most of them, as we look at it, kind of fell right into this area right here on the 5-point scale. And again, some of our local codes up here. Brevard County has the suspension or revocation of network internet access. I know we have our bring your own device and we have our acceptable use policy, but they've codified it in there. Hillsborough uses a reentry plan, something that we have started with our Success Academy students, a reintegration plan, but they do it more holistically, something for us to consider. And last year when I presented to this committee, some of you I remember from last year, we had a lot of discussion about disruption and insubordination. That has the most variance across the 8 districts that have multiple levels, 4 or 5. Some of them have it real low, some of them have it real high. We kind of landed here with it because when we looked at where we're at, and again, a draft, but this is a big area, followed by electronic device. That's also another area that sees a lot of difference of opinion across the different districts about, how to respond when students are causing these types of infractions. Yes, sir.
So in the student code of conduct, I noticed that sales of ammunition is a level 1, but insubordination is a level 2.
Yep.
Or profanity is a level 2. That just makes absolutely no sense to me. So, I mean, look, I lived on a ranch as a kid. I basically carried a gun in my back truck. So, it was a different time when I grew up and I went to school here. But it seems like a certain class of people are getting off scot-free with the sale of ammunition at school or after school, and then somebody else who might just not be able to communicate with someone gets frustrated and is insubordinate, then all of a sudden they're at more risk of, suspension than the person who's selling ammunition. It seems like we're putting in print policies that are discriminatory.
And that's why we're here talking. I mean, I'm not going to try and
Where are you
say,
seeing that?
hey,
I'm on the level 1 behavior for our
it's underneath.
It was on the links that they sent out.
Page 69, 69 has insubordination on the right side, and level 2 and 3. Page 69 is 64.
Right.
Okay.
And if you look underneath other, there's things that capture underneath other, which is different from other major classified, so there's a difference between the two.
Yeah, and then the other classified, distributing of printed materials. So if I'm like trying to get a petition signed or something,
There's a process you would go through the school to request the.
but if I didn't get that permission, then I'm at a level 2?
Possibly, yes, but again, this is where I think the relationship would be, where if you look at the level 2 responses, if you go back to the level 2, it's not like, you're gonna get suspended.
Right, but there are some restorative practice, but
Yes.
that is based solely on the administrator, right?
To a large degree, yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Jumping over to the last of the 5 areas would be, the lowest risk behavior of concern. And this is where we're, working from our starting point right here. We did have some additional things that Brevard County had that hadn't seen before. Just wanted to add it up there as possible things to add to our responses. We mentioned restorative practices a couple of times. One of the things that we would like to see from any of the groups that we present to is to have any ideas to expand our restorative practices. We have some in there. There's always more. There's always something that is going on out there, whether it's in the community or people are aware of because they work at universities and they talk across the country. There's other things that we can do to increase our restorative responses. We definitely love to add in this. So this, again, is just 5 levels, and this is our discussion point. If we're told, hey, stay with 3, stay with 3. Maybe it's 4 is the right answer. Perhaps 5 is the right answer, but this is where we want to talk before we take it up to the board for their consideration and eventual approval.
I think that 3 is fine, but I think that we should really focus more on restorative practices than these other items. I think that the restorative practices should be our first defense.
First response, I got you.
Our second defense should be these other things, like detention, in school, after school, whatever. But I just see it in print, and it, number one, if I was a parent, I wouldn't understand what the heck we were talking about. And I know me as a teenager, I wasn't the greatest kid. I mean, I played with alcohol and I smoked cigarettes and got a little scrappy sometimes. And I don't think that taking into consideration that kids are kids. I mean, we're not fully grown human beings until we're 25. We're fully functioning brains. We're gonna make mistakes. And we need to recognize that we can make mistakes, but we also need to have grace and forgiveness at the same time.
Absolutely.
And nurture them and make sure that that doesn't become a negative and that they can use it to their benefit.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that's why I go back to the relationship thing I said before. If we're not building relationships and we don't know our students, for 3 years I was the principal at East County High School. Not to get into the stories of when I was, but on this particular one, when I went in there, somebody said, you know, the kids won't care until they know you care. I'm like, save that for the bumper sticker. It took me about 2 weeks to realize that, oh my God, that's spot on accurate. And I would tell that to anybody that I worked with, had the fortune to bring over there. Our students at this school, and I use it because that's where it was at the time, but I believe it applies everywhere. Until your students know you care about them, they're not going to go through it. And so that's the relationship thing. And I'm not sitting there saying, oh, I'm the best, and look, I made my mistake, I get that. But at the same time, this is where we have to be. And if we look at the administrators, and we look at the teachers, and say they're infallible, we're wrong. We expect way more of them, and we should, and we have to. And we realize that there's a kid in the situation, and that's what their responsibility is, to build that relationship with that kid. And, you know, sometimes it's being firm, fair, and consistent, but at the same time, putting the arm around the shoulder figuratively to make sure that you understand and you know what's going on with the child. It's like one of the things that Mrs. Vaughn is working on, not to drag her into it again, with the whole foster care project. If we don't know about our foster kids, chances are we'll send them quicker down a wrong pipeline than we should. But if we have a relationship with them, and we do our due diligence, we can probably work miracles with some of these kids that have been left on the sidelines far too long and marginalized.
Do we have the capability in our district to hire more mental health counselors to help work on this restoration project? I like Hillsborough's idea.
Yeah, you are asking the wrong person about that. I'm
Well, could you
sorry.
recommend that to somebody,
Well, I
please?
know Tammy, I see her typing back there right now, absolutely.
I would like to recommend that. I
Okay,
think that,
yeah, but I don't have the wherewithal to
Just,
answer that.
I can share with you that through the CARES Act funding, part of that, a great deal of money, and I know Betsy knows as well, did go to expanding our mental health team to respond to our students in regards to that. So in actuality, our budget for mental health allocation continues to increase year after year. So that's a really
I would like to
positive
suggest that
thing.
we make the possibility of positions available within our district for people to meet with children as a restoration step, to have that step there, because I like also what Mr. Williams is saying is, rather than focusing on punishment, we've had all these positive changes in our district, how we're having all the children take these positive approaches. I think it would make sense that if we approached it as less of a punishment, as more here, let me help you.
Well, that's why we have the
Yeah.
PBIS and the interventions and the corrective
But
strategies.
we cannot put that job on somebody who's already doing 10 jobs in this district. We need to have somebody who's specific, that's their job.
Gotcha.
That's
Okay,
my
thank you.
recommendation.
The last part of the code of conduct is our essential information, and it covers some of the things that, weren't part of the introduction. This stuff, again, was scattered through the old code, so it's been all brought together. So this is kind of a laundry list. Notice the driver's license is really just for 6 through 12, and that's also for our teen dating, violence, and abuse. The last thing on there, vaping, N stands for electronic nicotine delivery system. It's the new code for the new term from the state. So you'll see that in our glossary as you get into that. And these are some of our posters that have been included in our code of conduct this year. Our students of the LGBTQ community, our graduation requirements from the state, the Fortify Florida app, which is required to be in our code of conduct, and also our character ed response as well. Our word of the month is in there as part of our code of conduct. Now, these are the new framework of the code of conduct. So we're not looking to change the framework, we're looking to work inside of there. Before I jump to the last set of questions, though, again, what else might be essential information to include in the essential information portion of our code of conduct? Because it's not just a list of this is what happens if you do something wrong. It's a more robust thing. And as we look at other districts and we've been studying these, I would like to say that the work that was done last year by a large group of individuals has really put our code of conduct on par with our contemporary districts in the region and the Big Ten, as we like to refer to them. This next part is kind of jumping off topic, and then we'll get back to the final questions at the next slide. But this is the request that I was given. What are our Success Academy demographics right now? This is first semester. We've had a total of 99 students referred to Success Academy. Before you look down on the left side, there's one thing I have to say about the Hispanic population. It's different from how we used to report it in the past because we are using the focus system for capturing information in student referrals and reporting up to the state for our sector information. When we do this, they report race as the white population, Black African American, multiracial, American Indian, Asian, Pacific Islander, and then there's one other group. What they do with the Hispanic population is they ask the question, are you Hispanic, yes or no? And that could be white Hispanic, African American Hispanic, multiracial Hispanic. So I don't have the clean numbers like I have here. So inside of all these, we do have students have responded or families who responded, yeah, they identify as Hispanic. And then something I went around with the focus individuals about, can't you just break it out so I can see it like I can see the others? And the answer is no, because their system is designed to report to the state. So when you look at these numbers, you got to keep that last bullet in mind.
So the state's using that information, is that what you're telling us?
What's that?
You said the state is using that information, is that what you're
No,
telling
I'm
us?
just saying, this is how they want it reported, this is how we're reporting it. Looking over to the right-hand side, we are also looking at it, the students who are an ESE student, more with the answer no. Those who might have a 504, those who are ELL, again, the answer no. Well, where we see a growing issue is definitely with the lunch being free and reduced lunch if they qualify for that. So more of that answered yes than no. And then that's by grade level. 8th grade is our highest group of students so far that have been referred during the course of the first semester.
Doesn't everyone qualify for free and reduced lunch?
The community eligibility program means all the schools are available, but they still look at it.
If they receive any type of assistance through federal or state means, they are part of that yes category, but parents no longer need to fill out the form.
So they still capture
All of our schools receive free and reduced lunch.
So they still capture the information, but now
But
there's not
that's
the
just
stigma.
demographically our school district, right?
To-
Because we have to be 70% to qualify for
Correct.
full
That is
free and
correct.
reduced lunch.
Correct.
So that's under our,
So it's kind of almost in line with our demographics.
I know we have some math people here that might be able to do this. I don't know if you break it
The
down.
lunch one may not be.
But for instance, 64 whites make up like, what, 47% of our population,
Roughly.
30 Black African American,
That makes
what
up
do we
About
have, like
15%. About 15%.
About 15%.
Okay, so then
Correct? 15%?
the math people
Right.
can figure out of their particular demographic, because this doesn't really tell the whole story. You have to figure, okay, 64 Caucasians out of, what did we say, 40?
47%.
Our white, yeah, our white population is about 42%-ish.
Is it 42 now?
Hispanic is higher than the
I
white,
knew that.
and then African American is slightly under
African-American is
15.
what, like 17?
I'm sorry,
About 15% African American, about 15%.
Yeah. 15.
Math people?
And look,
I can't even begin to do that.
one of the things that I know I've given a report up through about some of the stuff on the demographics of, out of school suspension and all. I mean, our rate right now for out of school suspension across the whole district is down to 7.4% for the whole district first semester. We were at 12 point something, our goal was to drop down to about 9 point something, I forget, I don't have exact points on that one, but you have to view the lens of any of the numbers this year with where were we at first quarter. So many students were home.
Yeah.
We had a wave that came in around November 1st. We started seeing that change. We just had another wave come in at the start of the calendar year, and then we had just another wave come in at the beginning of this month. So could we have another wave at the end of third quarter? Maybe. I anticipated myself personally, but I don't know for sure. So what I'm seeing as I'm looking at the numbers is that more students are in the building, we're seeing more incidents of stuff. What I can say also, and again, working on for accreditation board, is that our historical trend, and again, this year is a tough year to look at, even last year is a tough year to look at, because we lost the whole fourth quarter. But when you start looking at things like percentages and numbers, and you start comparing quarter 1, 2, and 3 for the last 3 years, not this year, but the last 3 years, you can see positive trend lines for a lot of our issues. Have they closed the gap? Has it been eradicated yet? Absolutely not.
They don't really use this yet.
Yeah, it's
I
very
mean,
difficult.
the data is just, it's just ugly.
Yeah,
I mean,
you can look at stuff
it's
inside of
noisy.
the numbers, you can sit there and say, okay, what are we looking at here percentage-wise?
What percentage were in the classroom?
Exactly. You
And
can
you
start
could
really,
maybe go to something like that, but it's too noisy.
yeah, it's way too noisy, yeah. But anytime I'm sharing information, I'm letting people know, keep it in mind. Last year's data, really only 3/4 of the year, being honest. This year, wow.
I'm sure the trends are going down.
Well, but when you look at our 5-year trend data, yes, it is going in a positive direction. Before all this hit, it's going in a positive. When I say positive, I'm not sitting there saying, oh my God, we solved the problem. I'm not being, pie in the sky, being honest. The trends are going in the right direction. Still work to be done. Still work to be done. So those are the demographics. I guess the big questions, and again, I know in the interest of time, I know you have a couple other things on the agenda, the 5 versus 3. One of the things I found that was interesting is 10 districts of the 13 looked at have only one code of conduct. They don't do the 2. There's only 3 that actually still maintain a 2, and then we're the 4th one when you add that in there. So should we go? When you think about what is the big difference between the 2, driver's license and team dating and violence, maybe we should combine it into one and have a document. Question that came up, I thought, and this is more of a board thing, but they will want to hear what the community thinks. Should we do this every year? Or should we even take a couple of districts that do it once every 3 years? Just an interesting thought. And then there's anything else, and I know I'm pushing hard on the time here on y'all, I'm sorry about that.
Just in the interest of time, when do you schedule to present to the board?
Typically, we're hoping to bring in, the first draft would be in April, probably the second meeting in April. And then we would come back with, that would be just a presentation at one of those briefing workshops, one of the afternoon type sessions. And then we take feedback from there, work it, incorporate what they have feedback, and and then come back for a second meeting, and then the third meeting. So ideally, end of May, worst case, beginning of June.
Would it be appropriate for us to review this and provide feedback?
Absolutely, that's why we wanted to come this early to you all. I mean, we have a meeting with DAC itself, we're going to be going out to a couple of the schools to get some student input. We just saw that the Bishop.
Student advisories,
Yes.
Reconvene in March, and so I didn't want to hit them right away, but I'm gonna say, can we get in there? You know, one of your first things to do when you come back. So, yeah.
And they went to Success last year and talked to the kids
Yeah.
there, which was some really great feedback from them as well.
I've already talked to Mr. Harris and Mr. Bones over there. We're gonna get that over there because I think those are the kids that, you know, really feel, you know, the most impacted by this. So we're gonna talk to them, absolutely, and then talk to the other schools. So doing it in an appropriate setting, so.
In the interest of time, give us time to get back to you on this, and do a little bit more research, and you'll find.
If you would like,
Tony, or just,
whether it's email or do you like me to come back and listen and write, I'll be more
let's
than
see,
happy.
let's first of all start here and come here, what to look at it, the serious and the few points of view on people, then we come back to it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Booth.
Thank you. Just a few more items on the agenda, just, update, in December committee, we met and discussed the selected top areas of interest, for remainder of 2020-21 year. The following topics received the highest election results and will be presented to the committee during upcoming meetings. Those, from March, will be community and parent engagement. April, trauma-informed care and mental health. May, inclusive education and cultural relevant teaching, as well as recruitment and retention. Just want to provide those updates and we'll present those in the upcoming meetings. So now, we'll have updates from our board leaders.
Oh, and in the interest of time, I just want to mention one thing that probably most of you have heard about, and it's something that would be of interest to this committee. Most of you have seen the viral video. It's been on the news, the young man from Island Coast. Who's not familiar with that? Looks like everybody's familiar. If you're not, yeah, it's a viral video that a young man in an AP class at Island Coast High School filmed, and you know, those TikTok things are like 60 seconds. And there were some, I'll just say controversy. You need to watch it yourself. The update I can give you, if you haven't already seen this on the news or in the newspaper, the school district, yes, they know about it. The teacher has, and this is what is always done when there's an investigation, the teacher was removed from the classroom until, you know, pending the results of the investigation. And it has been sent to professional standards. And as far as the young man, since we've been talking about code of conduct, there are things in code of conduct about recording, but I suspect there will be many maybe extenuating circumstances. I don't even know how to explain it, but I did ask today, I had a one-on-one phone meeting, as we do, board members do, with Dr. Atkins on this every other week basis. And I said, well, who is going to be dealing with the student on this? And I'm not casting dispersions on the student, I'm just saying there will be some kind of process with that student. And Dr. Atkins said it would be school-based. And you know, we were on the phone, he probably realized I was raising my eyebrows, and he said, and probably Mr. Simmons, who is the, what do you call his position? He's like the executive director
Executive director for high school.
for the high schools, like, yeah, okay, that he most likely will also be involved. So you are likely to see continuing coverage on the news on that, and that's what I can tell you officially.
When it's not for the thing, I would like to know a little bit more about the Oxfam saga.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It continues.
Really-
What I can tell you is on that, things are moving along. We don't know, will there be a settlement? What's going to happen with the case? We've already had the one on the public records.
I actually,
Yeah.
I don't want to touch the court case itself.
Yeah.
That's not for business.
Okay.
It is the board and the board, and there's been a lot of that stuff in the news, which was not very nice.
Yeah, and really, I can't,
I know.
I don't have that much information, first of all. And I think probably what you heard on the news is, what's happening. We don't know if there's, for the big court case, if there's going to be a negotiated set, who knows?
No, it's just.
Yeah.
Make the board look a little bit more on the case. There's some, there must be issues being.
Oh, okay, and yeah, all of those are right in the middle of that whole thing, so I don't really have a comment on that, but thank you.
We'll have our update for staff liaisons.
Good to see everybody. Dr. Blakely, thank you for serving in lieu of our chair tonight. Mr. Quisenberry could not make it due to an outside obligation. Also, contextual information for the month of March. In addition to parent and family engagement, it will be an opportunity for you all to revisit your conversation connected to the proximity plan. So it is not a standalone agenda item, but since Mr. Malloy is helping with communications from that vantage point, he will also be back with us in the month of March. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Anything good of the order?
Great program tonight at 9 on PBS about Black Church. This is their story, this is their song. Dr. Skip Gates is doing a 2-evening presentation, 2 hours each, on the history of Black Church and its involvement in the community and its relevance today and tomorrow. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity. If you're looking for something to do at 9 p.m., check it out and grab your prizes.
Anything else in the order? Any public comment?
No public comment.
Let's go. Motion to adjourn.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I couldn't help it, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, you have to actually take the vote on that one. There was a motion and a second, but not a resolution of the motion.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Dr. Newman, second by Sean. All in favor?
Aye. Anyone who stays seated is rejecting.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks. Yeah, get me that when you get there.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.